Independent Jewish homeland was to be created in the land of Israel.
Prepared this land for homeland for the Jews, but they betrayed us.
As in 1920, the cry went up, the government is with us, killed the Jews.
I was struck by the poverty of honor that existed in just so much of the world.
It was an appointment that would later come back to haunt the British.
Criminals led nations into war and turned simple people into monstrous tools of destruction. The promised homeland in Israel could have accepted the Jews of Europe, but Great Britain reneged on their forsaken promise. Shalom and welcome once again to CrossTalk. I'm Randy Weiss, a Jewish believer in a Jewish Messiah, and I'm also a lover of Israel. You know, together with the Hatikva Film Trust, we are presenting an important series about the history of modern Israel based on a powerful documentary called The Forsaken Promise. When last we met, the tragic story of the pogroms in Israel of 1929 were being discussed. In particular, the peaceful city of Hebron was considered. The Jewish people had an unbroken presence in Hebron for thousands of years. In the 1920s, the Ashkenazi Jews of Eastern European origins and the Sephardic Jews from the Iberian Peninsula lived alongside each other at peace with the local Arab population. But when violence erupted at the instigation of Islamic leadership, Arab mobs poured into the streets, creating a tragedy that must not be forgotten. Some images may not be suitable for young children, so parents must be advised this segment contains graphic examples of Arab brutality. But we must pursue the investigation underway in The Forsaken Promise, courtesy of our friends at the Hatikva Film Trust. Copies of the DVDs of this series and the individual film DVDs are available at our website. And now, The Forsaken Promise.
In 1929, the tranquility of the world's oldest Jewish community was shattered by the worst pogrom of the British Mandate.
All the leaders of the community, my father, the Ashkenazi Rav, and Sephardi Rav, and my brother, all went to the governor to ask for protection. And when he told them, go back and to your people and see that everybody stays home. And if they stay home, nothing will happen to them.
Once again, as in 1920, the cry went up, the government is with us, killed the Jews. And the government simply did nothing.
You didn't see on the whole time, not a policeman, not a responsible person, nobody. The crowd was, incited crowd was free to do whatever they planned. And one of the first houses that they attacked was my brother's house. And the result was very tragic. And they killed my brother, they killed his wife and his son, and only a son a year old was badly wounded and came out alive. With whatever they had, they killed, they tortured, they raped. It was terrible. Women in front of their husbands, children in front of their parents, without any consideration, without any feeling. And so it went all over the city. They attacked all the Jewish homes, and as I said, with a cruelty unbelievable. And after about 2 hours, appeared the policemen on horses, and with one shot in the air, the crowd dispersed and ran away.
Rivka's father's household was saved by their Arab landlord.
I remember very well the young boys' pupils pushing the door. It was almost open. And we had our landlord, an Arab landlord, who lived next door to us. And he came running and stood in front of our door, and he told all these incited people, only on my dead body you'll enter that house. And so whoever was in our house was saved, and whoever was in my brother's house, almost all of them were either dead or badly wounded.
The riots of August 1929 left 139 Jews dead and 339 injured. Of the 139 who lost their lives across the country, half of them lived in Hebron. The British authorities responded by ethnically cleansing Hebron of its Jewish population.
In Hebron, there was a large Jewish settlement continuously, right from the time of the Babylonian exile. And until the British administration came along, they had always lived amicably with their Arab neighbors.
It was very hard and very difficult for my father. He was very, very, very upset. And we didn't go back to Hebron. He tried every venue to make somebody, let the people return. My father died a few years later, heartbroken and ill, mourning his community destruction and loss of his family.
The highest term of imprisonment for the Hebron riots and murders was 18 months. There was one case of a fella who had killed the two young sons of a woman named Fruma Charcoal by dashing their brains out. He'd known the family for years, and when the mother pleaded with him to save their lives, he simply laughed at her. And they were battered to death. And with a surviving son, she appeared in court against him, and as well as the invalided father, and they described the attack together with other white eyewitnesses. The court freed the Arab and claimed that there was insufficient evidence.
One might wonder about the result of this tragedy. In a moment, another ugly truth of the forsaken promise.
Without any consideration, without any feeling. And so it went all over the city. They attacked all the Jewish homes, and as I said, with a cruelty unbelievable.
The British betrayed us.
The British authorities responded by ethnically cleansing Hebron of its Jewish population. The Jews had been stripped of their civil rights and declared as a subhuman race.
Millions perished because of the world's inaction. No nation on earth would welcome the Jews. The promised homeland in Israel could have accepted the Jews of Europe, but Great Britain reneged on their forsaken promise.
And I will bless those that bless you, and curse those that curse you.
If you're like me, you've probably heard that scripture since you were young. But one might ask, what does this really look like? Well, there are two ways that you can bless Israel in a very tangible way. One of those ways is to go. The other way is to plant trees. You see, Israel is a modern miracle in the desert of the Middle East because believers like us plant trees. So I'll ask, do you want to bless Israel? For every $25 contribution that you make, we're going to plant a tree in your name, and we'll send you a certificate that you can hang on the wall and display proudly that you're standing with and you have blessed Israel. So give me a call at 1-800-688-3422 or visit us on the web at crosstalk.org. Let us know how many trees you want to plant. And if you're able, join us on our next tour of the Holy Land and plant one with your own hands.
Two royal commissions followed the riots of 1929. As a result, the then colonial secretary, Lord Parsfield, issued a white paper in 1930 severely restricting Jewish immigration into Palestine and contravening one of the main obligations of the mandate given to Britain by the League of Nations.
The obligations are quite important. They were, first of all, to assist in the establishment of a Jewish homeland in Palestine. They were to encourage and facilitate immigration, Jewish immigration. They were required to promote close settlement as opposed to extensive cultivation of the land. But there was a constraint, and that was that nothing should be done which might prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. And I think at this point I'd like to look at this particular phrase in some depth because it's given rise to a lot of misunderstandings. The fact that when a document says without prejudice to this, that, or the other, is very clear that that is a subordinate provision. It is not the main provision. And why do I stress this? Because subsequently, as of 1929, the British Commission reports indicate that Britain's policy is no longer in favor of the Jews and the Arabs are discounted, but there's an equal policy, that there has to be Jewish interests and also we have to promote the Arab interests. Now, if that had been the situation, it would not have been necessary to have added it being clearly understood that nothing should be done. Because when you have a subordinate clause like that, it clearly indicates that there is a main clause, a main objective, a main policy, which is subjected or which is restricted in some fashion, but there's no equality between the two provisions. Now, when we have a look at nothing should be done which might prejudice, it says the civil and religious rights. It does not say political rights. It says civil and religious rights. Now, that of the existing non-Jewish communities. Now, I want to stop at civil and religious rights for a second, because Abdullah, when he was charged with the operation of the government of Transjordan, asked for powers to determine the civil, religious, and political rights, and that was rejected by Britain as being inconsistent with the mandate, which is very interesting. Second, the phrase says the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities. Now, it doesn't mention the future communities. In other words, we're talking about the existing population as of 1922. Now, the fact that Britain failed to regulate Arab migration after 1922 certainly places the Jews in an invidious position, because the whole idea was that Palestine at the time, in 1920, it is true, had a majority of Arabs I think there are about 400,000 Arabs covering the whole of the Mandate territory, which was west of the Jordan and east of the Jordan. And there are about 80,000 Jews who were west of the Jordan. And the idea was that the Jews would migrate to what was essentially an underpopulated or depopulated territory, which was west of the Jordan.
The Passfield White Paper of 1930 asserted that there was not enough land for newcomers in Palestine, and that Jewish immigration and ownership of land be drastically curtailed. The new government policy in Palestine caused a wave of protest in Parliament. Former Prime Minister David Lloyd George observed, "They dare not try to kill Zionism directly, but they try to put it in a refrigerator." The Mandates Commission of the League of Nations was far from happy too.
A study of the minutes of the Permanent Mandates Commission ever since 1923 shows quite clearly that they were most unhappy with the way that Britain was handling the mandate.
In the face of such criticism, Prime Minister Ramsay MacDonald wrote a letter to Chaim Weizmann, which was tabled in the House of Commons, stating that Britain would not abandon its commitments to the Jewish people. The letter was dubbed by the Arabs as the Black Letter, and from that point, British-Arab relations began to deteriorate.
The appeasement of the Arab population of Palestine by the British was soon to have horrific results. As mentioned in our last episode, Sir Herbert Samuel had promoted Haj Amin al-Husseini to the position of the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. He turned on the Jews with a vengeance, and his later support of Hitler's final solution is legendary, to the point that he became known as the Arab Führer. His role in the Forsaken Promise will not soon be forgotten. Please stay tuned.
Without any consideration, without any feeling. And so it went all over the city. They attacked all the Jewish homes, and as I said, with a cruelty unbelievable.
The British betrayed us.
The British authorities responded by ethnically cleansing Hebron of its Jewish population. The Jews had been stripped of their civil rights and declared as a subhuman race.
Millions perished because of the world's inaction. No nation on earth would welcome the Jews. The promised homeland in Israel could have accepted the Jews of Europe, but Great Britain reneged on their forsaken promise.
The reason that I love Regent University is summed up in one word: it's excellence.
Good. I really hope his rebuttal close is going to seal the deal.
We're going to help him out right now, so we're excited to see what's going to happen.
If we are a dedicated and committed people, making the world a better place to be is what it's all about.
During the years leading up to World War II, leaders around the globe were aware of the horror facing the Jews of Germany and throughout Europe. The Evian Conference was called by America's President, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The heads of state from many nations were invited to find a solution to the certain tragedy that was coming to the Jewish people. And so, the Forsaken Promise continues.
In 1936, Haj Amin al-Husseini, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, instigated an Arab armed revolt across Palestine which continued with only brief respites until 1939. Meanwhile, in Europe, anti-Semitism was intensifying. By 1938, Adolf Hitler had been ruling over Germany for 5 years. The Jews had been stripped of their civil rights and declared as a subhuman race. Their property was being targeted, their books burnt.
und damit der Sieg des Judentums sein, sondern die Vernichtung der jüdischen Rasse in Europa.
Thousands of Jews were clamoring to get out of Germany. In many neighboring countries, and especially Poland, where Shalom Lindenbaum grew up, anti-Semitism was also running at fever pitch.
יהודים לא יכלו להתקבל לעבודה לבתי חרושת של המדינה. באוניברסיטאות היו נומרוס קלאוזוס, מספרים מצומצמים של יהודים. וגם אז הונהג שהיהודים צריכים לשבת, הסטודנטים היהודים, בצד שמאל. היו מכות עד כדי רציחות. בפוליטכניקום בלמברג רצחו 3 סטודנטים בסכינים. הרבה מאוד יהודים לא היה להם, אפילו לא רק יהודים, בכלל התנאים הכלכליים במזרח אירופה היו קשים מאוד. היו המון אנשים שלא היה להם איפה לגור. ואחוז ההתאבדויות היה די גבוה, בשל סיבות כלכליות. אצל היהודים הוא היה הרבה יותר.
With persecution at epidemic proportions across Central Europe, there were hundreds of thousands of desperate and homeless Jews. Then they were still free to leave, but they had nowhere to go. In July 1938, President Roosevelt of the United States called an international conference at Evian in France in order to search for a solution to the escalating Jewish refugee problem. Present were representatives of 32 nations, including Britain.
Britain agreed to attend that conference on one condition, that Palestine wasn't even mentioned as a possible haven.
The British interest was the Suez Canal through Egypt to India, part of the empire. The oil in Iraq was run by British Petroleum. So the scale of weight between Arab countries and the Jewish people was in Arab favor, and the British were loyal to their interests, not the moral aspect of the whole problem.
The Evian Conference was presented with numerous photographs, reports and eyewitness accounts that provided evidence of the persecution facing European Jewry. Golda Meir was present as the official Jewish observer from Palestine. She later recalled,
"Sitting in that magnificent hall, listening to the delegates of 32 countries rise, each in turn, to explain how much they would have liked to take in substantial numbers of refugees, and how unfortunate it was that they were unable to do so, was a terrible experience. I felt a mixture of sorrow, rage, frustration, and horror. I wanted to get up and scream at them all. Don't you know that these numbers are human beings? People who may spend the rest of their lives in concentration camps or wandering around the world like lepers."
בניית יהודים מלברוח מאירופה להגיע לכאן, וגם לא קיבלו אותם לא באנגליה וגם לא בארצות הברית, זה היה ממש שיתוף פעולה עם היטלר, אפילו אם הם לא התכוונו לזה. זאת עובדה שאיש לא יוכל להכחיש את זאת.
On the 9th of November 1938, the Jews of Germany were targeted as Nazis went on the rampage. In what became known as the Night of Broken Glass, or Kristallnacht, almost 100 Jews were murdered. Jewish businesses were smashed. Synagogues were ransacked and razed to the ground. Despite the fact that the evils of the Nazi regime were plain for all to see, the world stood aghast but did nothing.
Millions perished because of the world's inaction. No nation on earth would welcome the Jews. The promised homeland in Israel could have accepted the Jews of Europe, but Great Britain reneged on their forsaken promise. Instead, a small gesture was made that did save the lives of 10,000 Jewish children.
After Kristallnacht, on the 9th of November 1938, British Parliament passed a rule that 10,000 kids of Jewish origin, I think aged from 12 to 16, would be admitted to Britain. And I came on the first Kindertransport from Vienna to England.
Alfred Bader was 14 years old when he arrived in England at the end of 1938. He was taken in by the Schaff family in Hove on the south coast.
What Britain did in this case was very good. The Jewish communities tried to persuade the Americans in Washington to do the same, and Washington wouldn't. No other country in the world, as you know, after Evian, admitted that many.
Although Dr. Alfred Bader went on to become one of the world's leading research chemists, the rest of his family didn't survive the war. By late 1938, it was becoming apparent to the British government in London that war with Germany was a strong possibility, despite the pact that Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain had made with Hitler. The Jewish question and Palestine, as they saw it, was becoming increasingly problematic. In November 1938, the Cabinet Committee on Palestine held a meeting which would result in the government's eventual reneging on the Balfour Declaration.
We are out of time, but let me remind you that this project is only possible through the kindness of the Hatikva Film Trust. DVDs of this entire series, along with the film itself, The Forsaken Promise, are available through our website, www.crosstalk.org, or by calling the number on the screen. Please, continue to pray for the peace of Jerusalem and for the love of God to be made known to all who need His forgiveness. Jesus is Lord, and He is coming to bring perfect redemption. Prepare your heart for Israel's Messiah. All of us at CrossTalk International and the Hatikva Film Trust announce God's peace can reign in your life. Until next time, shalom and God bless you.
Because He loves me, I will follow Him. Because He loves me, I will follow Him. Because He loves me, because He loves me, because He loves me, I will follow Him. Because He loves me, I will follow Him.